Osio Nagad, Jennifer Lauren Dagwado. Hello everyone, I'm Jennifer Lauren, Cherokee Nation citizen and host of Osio, Voices of the Cherokee People, and Senior Director of Cherokee Film. Welcome to Chalagi wherever we are. Today we'll dive into the world of Cherokee plants and medicine, discussing our ancient uses preserved and perpetuated in today's world. We'll start today's show with remarks from Principal Chief of the Cherokee Nation, Chuck Hoskin Jr. Then Chief Hoskin will join me to talk a little bit more about the traditional plants cultivated by our people and their use as medicine. After that, we will join Deputy Chief Bryan Warner for a conversation with Cherokee citizen and Professor Clint Carroll. Next is our panel discussion, where we will welcome Feather Smith and Wade Ryan Mackey to discuss the history and traditions vital to our ancestors. And finally, we are excited to have Cherokee National Treasure Tommy Wildcat join us for our musical segment. And now it is my pleasure to introduce my friend and Principal Chief Chuck Hoskin Jr. for his remarks.
Osio, my fellow Cherokees, I'm honored to be with you again today and explore an aspect of our tribal culture that deeply resonates with me and likely so many citizens across the country. We will spotlight a pillar of our cultural heritage, traditional plants and medicine, and more importantly, how our tribal government is preserving this knowledge through two essential programs, the Cherokee Heirloom Seed Program and the indispensable Cherokee Medicine Keepers Group. These endeavors not only preserve our history, but also offer an accessible pathway for all citizens to engage with and learn accurate cultural facts. The Cherokee Heirloom Seed Program is a testament to Cherokee Nation's commitment to safeguarding our agricultural legacy. Through meticulous cultivation and preservation, we ensure the continuity of heirloom seeds, seeds used by our ancestors before removal. These seeds carry the stories of our ancestors, the flavors of our past, and the resilience of our people. By participating in this program, Cherokees can reconnect with their ancestral roots and better understand the significance of biodiversity and sustainable growing practices, something our people have understood for generations. The traditional plants like corn, beans, and squash, along with medicinal plants like tobacco, are not merely botanical specimens. They hold our ancient wisdom and healing practices. Through education and seed shipping efforts, we empower our citizens to rediscover these natural foods and remedies. That bridges the gap between past and present. Central to the preservation and dissemination of this invaluable knowledge is the Cherokee Medicine Keepers Group. Comprised of Cherokee-speaking elders, this revered group serves as stewards of our medicinal heritage. They preserve age-old traditions and knowledge and share those ideas in the Cherokee language for future generations. That wisdom transcends time, and these dedicated practitioners are nurturing a new generation of healers. For me, as the chief of the largest tribe in the country, it gives me solace and great hope that they are revitalizing and preserving these ancient ways. By embracing these cultural efforts, we honor our ancestors, which benefits our collective well-being and spirituality. We're also cultivating healthier future generations to come. The Cherokee Heirloom Seed Program and the Cherokee Medicine Keepers Group are a testament to our interconnectedness with nature and our history. Let us embrace these cultural treasures, for they not only preserve history, but also pave the way for a healthier, more harmonious future for all. I say with the deepest respect and appreciation, Wado, to all those who dedicate their time and talents to this most worthwhile endeavor.
Wado Chief, thanks for joining us to talk about this really important and interesting topic. I think a lot of people are interested in learning more about this, so let's go ahead and get into it. So what do you feel is the importance of perpetuating our ancient plants and medicines?
Well, I think that we're all on, as Cherokees, a journey to reconnect with our culture, spirituality, and some are further along that journey than others. It depends on how you were brought up and what you were taught, but there's a hunger across the Cherokee Nation, across the Cherokee people. I think when it comes to medicinal plants, and even when we're talking about other aspects of plants like the heirloom plants, it's really accessible to people as they're starting this journey, or maybe they're into this journey. And so being able to trace back plants to our ancient roots, being able to understand the medicinal aspects to that. I think it fills us with something that we're particularly missing nowadays, which is this idea of how can we sort of heal ourselves, how can we care for each other, and how can we do it in a traditional way. And then beyond that, I think the idea of being able to cultivate plants, understand them, is something that builds a real sense of identity in Cherokee people. And I think that's what we're all searching for. And as we spread this knowledge, I think Cherokees, no matter where they may live in the heart of the Cherokee Nation in our capital, or they may live across the country, they start to understand that we all are learning about this, and this knowledge is precious. And I think that connects us in this day and age, and I think that's the reason we need to share this knowledge.
Yeah, I agree. And so in my experience in discussing the subject with elders around the reservation over the years, I mean, I see that they still respect plants for both sustenance and for healing. So I know the Cherokee Nation is preserving these plants and providing opportunities to maintain and harvest traditional plants, correct?
That's correct. And this is a great example of where we in the government are following the lead of our elders, which is really the way Cherokee culture is built. These traditions have been held for a long time, since creation, and passed down. We're in a day and age now, though, where we have the resources to, say, in Adair County, set aside a medicinal plant reserve so that the elders can go there and they can count on that being there for generations to come. More recently in Kenwood, we've done something I think that's really exciting and impactful, which we've set aside hundreds of acres for a cultural preserve that will be the home of language preservation, but also the medicinal plants which we're talking about. And so we're looking for those opportunities so that elders can always count on those lands to be there for them, but also they can take young people there. They can take citizens there and talk about what these plants mean in a really accessible way. And I think Cherokees can be proud of the fact that their government has set aside these lands so that for generations to come, we'll still be talking about this and perpetuating it.
Absolutely. I mean, that is so cool. And what a responsible way to show respect for our historic lifeways. And that brings to mind the Medicine Keepers program. So would you mind sharing what this program means to the Cherokee people and why you think it's so important?
It's another example of following the lead of our elders, and similar, in fact, there's overlap with these medicinal plant reserves. So this is a group of fluent-speaking elders who have held on to these traditions. These traditions were passed down to them, the knowledge about medicine and the use of plants for both sustenance and spirituality. Lifting them up and giving them an opportunity to not only share their knowledge, but to record the knowledge and to make sure that as the generations pass, there will always be a Medicine Keepers group because we need that. I think it's exciting, particularly for young people, to meet these elders or at least experience what they're sharing. And it reminds us that if we will listen to our elders and get behind their efforts, then we can do something really great for the Cherokee Nation.
Yes, and we actually are going to learn a little bit more about the Medicine Keepers program here later on in this show, so stay tuned for that. The environment, I think most people know, is especially vital to Cherokees and Native Americans in general. So the question is, have any non-Native entities threatened precious natural resources like these on our reservation?
And certainly they have, and we start with the idea that Cherokees are to be, and I think we were put here to in part be good stewards of the land, the air, and the water. We have a responsibility. We have a legal responsibility, I think, to do our part to make sure the environment is sustainable for generations to come. Of course, the nature of the environment is we're all in it together, for good or bad. And there are some bad actors out there. There are some industries that have polluted. I think everyone knows that. I mean, my mind goes back to before I was Principal Chief. I served in another position, but I got to bear witness to the government of the Cherokee Nation working with the state of Oklahoma to remove toxic waste. This is radioactive type waste from areas near waterways in the heart of the Cherokee Nation. And that is something that demonstrates the strength of the Cherokee Nation, how we're exercising that responsibility. More recently, we've been concerned about poultry waste and measures to protect an industry that historically has been demonstrated to inflict some harm on the environment. And so when we're thinking about poultry waste, we're also thinking about some of those springs in Adair County that are in and around that medicinal reserve we talked about, or we're talking about Kenwood, where some of the streams flow through where our people have lived since removal, and what harm could be inflicted that's irreparable on those streams. Now, one thing I think Cherokee people should take some encouragement from is generations ago, due to federal Indian policy, Cherokee Nation was really suppressed in a way where we couldn't make a meaningful positive impact on environmental protection. Times have changed. Certainly we're still laboring under some constraints that tribes across the country have to labor under, but we are maximizing, I think, today our effort to protect the air, land, and water, and that's what we should do. I mean, long before there was any of these regulations or any of the need for funding, our people were caring for the land in a sustainable way because it was the right thing to do. It was the Cherokee way. If we can return to sort of those first principles and then apply it in the context of law and resources and funding and being good stewards in the modern sense, I think we can, for generations to come, be the stewards of the land and air and water we were meant to be.
Excellent to hear. Makes me feel good as a Cherokee citizen to know that all of that work is going on. And we certainly have to always remain diligent. And so my final question is, we recently lost a cherished spiritual leader and medicine keeper, Crosland Smith Jigesa. Would you mind sharing what he meant to you and the Cherokee people?
Well, he meant a great deal to me as an advisor, and also we've got to recognize he meant something to all Cherokees. Crosland Smith really belongs to all of us, and as we take time to listen to him while he was living and then remember him as he's passed, I think we're better Cherokees for it. One of the things about Crosland that I really admired was that he loved everyone. He treated everyone with respect. He believed everyone was entitled to dignity, no matter who they are, Cherokee or non-Cherokee, no matter what walk of life they came from. I'm going to tell you, in the times we're living in right now, where there is some harshness sometimes to the rhetoric, where there is an edge that I think gives Cherokee some discomfort, I think we think about the way Crosland treated everyone. And so for all that Crosland brought us in terms of traditional knowledge, his knowledge of medicinal plants, his knowledge about Cherokee lifeways, those things will stay with us because they've been recorded. Certainly you and others have made an effort to celebrate him and showcase him as we should, and he's written down his thoughts in his books. But I want to tell you the impression that he makes on people, that Cherokees treat people with respect and dignity, and that's something to be honored. That lesson alone sticks with me, and it's something we've got to continue to pass down. But Crosland was such an impactful individual for so many reasons, and we miss him.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have to say, I think you have, correct me if I'm wrong, coined the term Cherokee goodness.
Yes, of course.
And I love that so much. I love it every time I hear it. And I see a lot of similarities in the things that Crosland taught in that phrase, Cherokee goodness.
Well, we're all, I think, touched and impacted in a positive way by Crosland. So I think anything that we've done in terms of Cherokee goodness was informed by his example and his teachings. And so that's a good thing.
All right. Well, thank you very much for your time today and for your strong leadership. We now go to Tahlequah, where Deputy Chief Bryan Warner is joined by Professor Clint Carroll.
Wado, Jennifer, and Sio Nagad. Hello, everyone, and welcome here in the beautiful setting here at the Cherokee Heritage Center. Going to have a distinguished Cherokee guest today, Dr. Clint Carroll. Clint, welcome. I just want to give everybody a little bit of information about Dr. Carroll. He got his doctorate at the University of California, Berkeley in environmental science, policy, and management. And he is also an author and an associate professor currently of ethnic studies at the University of Colorado, Boulder. So Clint, those are quite the credentials. I'd like to say wow, and congratulations on all of that hard work. But really, let's tell everybody, like, what is it that drove you in that direction?
Well, Brian, it's really good to be here and talking with you today. Well, I got to go back to my father. My dad, Cherokee father, instilled in me some of these ethics that kind of guide the passion behind my work. Specifically, I remember I was out one day, target practice with a BB gun. Decided that I would take aim at a bird sitting on the fence right behind the target practice, and shot, killed a bird, had no idea what to do. Happened to be a mockingbird. my dad, I ran to him and asked him what I should do, and you know, he told me very solemnly, we don't do that. We don't kill indiscriminately. We don't kill things that bring us joy. And he told me about his relationship to the mockingbird, and you know, how it sang every morning for him. And it was that moment, and I reflect back on it often, that really to me was conveying a teaching. And I've carried that forward through, you know, my schoolwork. I was fortunate to work with communities in northern Mexico as an undergraduate student. I actually went all the way to the Bahamas to work on environmental issues there, and it was always talking with local people about the knowledge that they carried and the concerns that they had about their place that really stuck with me. And so that combination of upbringing and, you know, research experience as a young person, I just wanted to apply those things back home.
Cherokee Nation has been stewards of not just one another, but really all the land and all the other creatures around. So very fascinating. So, you know, throughout that though, what parts of ethnic studies, how does that include, let's help the audience understand how that includes environmental science and the other parts of that.
Our department is about honoring all people and honoring a different perspective that ethnic studies provides. You know, we start from histories of struggle, and that includes indigenous nations, Native American nations, as well as our brothers and sisters in other communities who have struggled with being marginalized, with being disenfranchised. And you know, what comes out of that are alternative perspectives to how we envision our current situation and where we might be headed. So within that program, I teach indigenous studies, but I bring to that the environmental aspect, and I center that in my classes and in my work. But fundamentally, it's about how we can all come together as one, because I think the power of unity and in offering, again, like I said, that different perspective from the dominant society that tends to be exploitative. It tends to want to extract and, you know, to your point, not give thanks, not consider future generations. You know, that's kind of what we stand for, and I feel really good being in that place working with some amazing folks.
As we're kind of leaning into the future and taking a look at future generations, what are some of the things that you notice and recognize today in our environment, our ecosystems, the different areas that we can do differently so that we can leave that that next generation in a better place?
Yeah, well, I think, you know, a lot of the work that I've been doing with elders and knowledge keepers, you know, we look in all different directions. Can be looking at what their hopes and dreams are for today and into the future. And a lot of that work has centered more recently working with younger people. And so I think, you know, getting the youth, centering what they have to say, but also exposing them, allowing them to understand what Cherokee values are, and then you know, bringing that forward into actual practices. And it can be things like recycling and you know, being more conscious of what you use and how. But I think those cultural elements are even more important. They're grounding, like we were talking about earlier. You know, how do you have a good relationship to the plants, the animals, the land itself, the water, and then how do you carry that forward into what your influence is on other people around you, you know? Right. And I think as Cherokee people, that's always what we have to think about, is how are we modeling these values, and how are we influencing others who maybe aren't Cherokee and have a lot to learn from that.
The wisdom keepers, tell me a little bit more. I know we have an 800-acre tract that we, you know, basically kind of said, hey, we want this as off limits to everybody. We want to make sure that this is natural. Tell me some things that you've been doing with our wisdom keepers, and let's enlighten the audience about what they actually do.
Well, I've had the real good fortune to help facilitate their efforts and really try to implement, well, I should say, make sure that their mission gets fulfilled. And their mission is primarily twofold. Protect the land and influence in a good way some of the policies that might benefit from being informed from that traditional Cherokee perspective. And then two, perpetuate the knowledge and the language you know, that goes along with that knowledge. And so working with them since, well, they formed in 2008, and we've done a number of things together, including working with Cherokee Nation, the establishment of that groundbreaking moment of the preserve. And so that's really kind of a more recent accomplishment, if you will. Some of the work we've done in the past, and I think this coincides with the establishment of the preserve, is influencing or informing the development of an agreement with the Buffalo National River so that Cherokee people can gather within the park boundaries. Now, the specifics of that are still being hashed out, so it's not in practice at the moment, but the foundation's there. And really what that is speaking to is not only Cherokee people's relationships with that place, counteracting a policy that was fundamentally about excluding Native people from these areas, and in doing so excluding the practices that they have that actually go a long way in contributing to the health of that place. Yes. So understanding that people and the land, at least when you practice and think about things from a traditional Cherokee perspective, they belong together. That's a really important thing that they've worked so hard to instill in me and everyone they talk to. A project that I'm really proud of is we've worked together to develop what we called the Cherokee Environmental Leadership Program. And that was, at the time, it was a 3-year program, but COVID happened, so it turned into a 5-year program. But it was designed to really answer their call. They said, we can do so much as a group of elders meeting together, but what is it for if we don't include younger people and younger voices in this conversation? So really that was a matter of fulfilling that call, and we're looking forward to the future. It was a pilot program. They graduated 5 students just last February. So we're very proud of them and looking forward to what's to come.
Well, congratulations on that success. And you mentioned one thing too, how much more important is it, you think, teaching non-natives about our traditions and everything, because I think that helps them understand who we are and why we do what we do.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really important. I was extremely blessed and fortunate to work with our spiritual leader who passed away a couple months ago. His name was Crosland Smith, as you know. An amazing person and a dear friend and a grandfather to me, and that was his main point. He's like, well, we've got to preserve and perpetuate, but we also have to get the word out.
That's right.
Because these are fundamental values that belong to everyone. As Cherokee people, as Kituwa people, we've been safeguarding them, but it's time for people to know. And with that, like we were talking about earlier, unity, loving all people. Like you've been saying, supporting everybody, loving everybody, supporting everybody in a loving way. That's the core foundational values of Kituwa people, Anigadu Wagi, Cherokee people. And I've been fortunate to help him get that word out through his books. He's published 3, and they're just wellsprings of knowledge and wisdom and insight into what is ailing our contemporary world and how we can recenter and refocus ourselves.
Yeah. Crosland was a great, to me, a great indigenous scientist as well as a spiritual leader.
Absolutely.
And being a scientist yourself and thinking about these things, science is no good if we do not share, right? And it's the same thing about love and about sharing. All those community values is about sharing our knowledge and working to serve one another. Well, Dr. Clint Carroll, I can't thank you enough, sir, for being
Pleasure.
here. You said it. It's not always easy to grow understanding, and sometimes it's easy to do the wrong thing each and every day. But we have this opportunity as keepers of our lands and of our people to turn back the clock, if you will, and reset our mind on that center. And I think your words and the work that you do will exemplify that for years to come. So again, wadon to you, sir.
Wadon to you. Appreciate it.
Well, wadon to our audience that is out there today. We just say gigayui. We love you here. And now back to you, Jen, in the studio. Wadon.
I love it. Wado, Deputy Chief, and Clint for that enlightening conversation. I love learning about all of these cool things. Okay. Now it is my pleasure to introduce Feather Smith, Cherokee Nation ethnobiologist, and Wade Ryan Mackey, Manager of Cherokee Curriculum Development at the Language Center and Ceremonial Grounds Leader. Sio Nagat and Wado for coming out today.
Sio.
It's good to see you all. Okay, so Feather, I have an idea, but getting started here, would you explain to us what it means to be an ethnobiologist and how that differs from a regular biologist?
So, of course, biology is the study of life and its interactions with the environment. In ethnobiology, we look at how a people interacts with their environment. So in my job, I get to specifically focus on our Cherokee interactions within our environment. It's exciting in that I still get to study the plants and the wildlife, which was what I had gone to school for, but I get to also study the cultural interactions and the reasons for those interactions, the language, and the way that it really relates to me and my family. It's been one of the things because when I'm going throughout my day-to-day life, I get to work with the Cherokee Nation Seed Bank, but then I also get to work with people like the Medicine Keepers and facilitating with their projects. And so I'm always learning on my job, and it's really probably the favorite part of my job is getting to work with the Cherokee Nation Medicine Keepers.
I bet. Yeah, that would be such an honor and a privilege to be able to work with the Medicine Keepers every day. I think there's a lot of interest from Cherokee Nation citizens, you know, just about that connection and people wanting to know more about it. So hopefully this show will help everyone to kind of have a better understanding. Wade, on the medicine side, what can you share with us about the cultural significance of plant-based medicine?
You know, as a young person, I'm really pleased to be able to, share some of my experiences. And we have a lot of elders that know a lot more than me. But I've had the privilege of kind of sitting at their knee and learning some things. And what they really stressed was the significance of our plant medicine, that ultimately, even though we have a medicinal relationship with every aspect of nature, different animals, plants themselves are probably the main focus of our traditional medicine practices. Plants in their natural environment are a lot of times sought out, gathered, collected. There's a relationship with those plants. And when they're gathered, there's a process that you go through to protect the plants and natural environment as well as the population. So you just don't take them all. But through the process of collecting them, you establish a stronger relationship with them. And the belief is if you collect them in the proper way, they not only survive, but they actually come back stronger. You'll find more and more of those medicinal plants. And they say that all of those plants that you go outside, there really aren't weeds. They're all medicine. Everything that grows has a relationship to our people, where our people lived. When we interacted with our natural environment, even if it might have been an invasive species, or when we moved from our homeland back east here to Indian Territory and reestablished the new nation, we learned new plants and we established relationships with them. And their roots, their leaves, their stems, their blossoms, their fruits, they all have different aspects of medicine. So one part of the plant might be used for one thing and another part would be used for something different. And you don't harvest those plants ahead of time because it's almost like wishing something bad. So when our medicine people do go and collect these plants for medicinal purposes, they already know where they are in the environment, so they will go to those plants and they will harvest them. And sometimes, they might have some things growing around their house, but for the most part, we go to those plants when we need them and we take what we need. And we always give something in return. So it's always about this relationship. It's not a commodity or a resource. These are our family members. These plants are our relatives. And even the animals that we use as medicine, we treat them with love and respect, and we have to have a relationship with them. But the thing about the plants is, each plant has several purposes. One of the elders that used to be on the Medicine Keepers, Hastings Shade-Jagesa, he used to say every plant had 16 uses. And in private, I asked him, I said, 16 really, just that number? And he goes, well, I think that's kind of a symbolic estimation. Some might have more, some might have less that we know about, but every plant has all these uses. And he explained to me, as well as other people, he was there at the meeting and he would talk. A lot of these meetings, there would be elders that would kind of almost give a little bit of a demonstration or a little bit of a lecture about subject areas. And one of the things that he would talk about is, when you're first learning about these plants, you learn this plant is for this plant is for that. This plant might also be for this, and this plant might also be for that. But sometimes you take this part of this plant, and this part of this plant, and this part of this plant, and it makes it stronger. It makes it specific to that person's need. So you might know that prairie willow, what we call redroot, has salicylic acid, which is the basis for aspirin. So we know chemically what that does for us. You can know what that plant is used for, but it doesn't mean that that person that's suffering from an illness uses that specific plant. Our elders have such a relationship with the plants that when they have a relationship with a person that's ill, they use the right plant for the right situation, for the right person. So just because this plant might have this gift or this medicine doesn't mean that that's the right plant for that person at that time. So they have to discern, they have to go through this process of figuring out what plant should be for that person at that time. So it's really about relationship. And so this process of using these traditional medicines really puts our elders and our practitioners of this tradition in close contact with the environment. They have to know where these plants are growing all year round. They have to know what they look like in the winter and the summer, spring and fall, what they look like on this side of the hill versus that side of the hill. Yeah. And so it's all about establishing relationship with a part of our family that most people don't even really see as relatives anymore.
Absolutely. There's so much to it. Thank you so much for all of that. Feather, switching back to you, can you talk about what inspired the creation of a program many people know about, which is the Cherokee Heirloom Seed Program, and how does it reflect on the Cherokee Nation's commitment to preserving our culture?
So it's kind of interesting because the seed program has turned into such a popular and important program for us, but it was almost kind of a byproduct and an accidental program. There was a conversation back in the early 2000s about having the Cherokee Nation represented in the Svalbard Global Seed Vault. And the idea being that since we're a sovereign nation, they wanted to see us represented. But when we got to kind of doing the research, and I say we, I wasn't with the program at the time, but when everybody kind of sat down and started looking, what we found was that there were really no seeds here within the Cherokee Nation at the time, at least nothing that we could verify were what we considered to be true Cherokee seeds. And so that became the mission, was to track these seeds down and bring them back to the Cherokee Nation. And they've reached out to multiple entities. We worked quite a bit with the Eastern Band of Cherokees to bring back at first about 9 varieties of Cherokee heirloom seeds. Now we've got 10. And then what we kind of realized was that we couldn't just grow these seeds or just have them represented kind of being stored. You have to grow them, you have to interact with them to actually be able to preserve the genetic integrity of these seeds. So that really became the mission was that we had a plot set aside at the Cherokee Nation complex where we were able to start growing these Cherokee heirloom crops for the purpose of genetic preservation, which is a little bit different. You know, in any time that we're growing, hobby gardens are important, home gardens are important, but the goals of a home garden are a little bit different from what we do. And so we started growing for the purpose of getting the genetic integrity back to all of the seeds that we had, and then making sure that those genetics were going to be preserved for the long term. And after we finally had a good genetic seed stock to work with and that we had stored, what we got to realizing is that you really only need a small amount of seeds for that genetic seed stock. And then we had these gallons of seeds that everybody kind of went, what are we going to do with this? And so it's really Pat Gwynn who was credited for both getting the program started, and it was sort of his idea, who said, this needs to go back out to the community. The Cherokee way of thinking about what would be considered Cherokee property, so land, territory, or Cherokee seeds, is that no one person, no one entity can own that. That is something that's owned collectively by every Cherokee. So it was a natural process to get those seeds back out into the hands of citizens, and of course to never ask for anything for that. That belongs to them, so you know, we don't ask that they ever pay for their seeds. And from that, we've grown into a very popular program. We've got 10 varieties of what we consider to be Cherokee heirloom crops. So they're things that were cultivated by the Cherokees prior to removal, a lot of them prior to European contact. So it's stuff that has been with us for centuries or millennia. They're unique to us. They were our seeds. But then with that, we also have some of the seeds that we kind of adopted along the way, such as things like Job's tears or gourds. And then because we had this space out there, our elders kind of started going, since we sit right along a little spring, they wanted to see some native plants represented. So the very first native plant that we had planted at the site was river cane, because it's so important to us for so many different reasons, utilitarian reasons. They really wanted to see river cane represented. Once we got the river cane growing, it just became a natural process, in that every year we would add anywhere between 1 to 10 to 15 plants until we have well over 100 plants at our little site, which still sits right there next to the Cherokee Nation complex. And now it serves as both the vessel for growing these Cherokee heirloom crops that we're able to provide through the seed bank, but we also get to grow all these native plants as well, where we can educate, bring tours through and educate people on some of these Cherokee native plants. And then if the plants will give us some seeds, and that we can easily get the seeds from them, store them, dry them out, then we're also able to give that back out through the seed bank. And that gets just a little bit more of that Cherokee culture. And again, our plants are our relatives, so it puts that back into the hands of those citizens.
Absolutely. It's such a cool program, and I know that all of our at-large citizens really enjoy being able to request and receive those seeds as well. And so quickly, could you tell us about how people do go about getting the seeds?
So we have already closed for the year of 2024. Of course, we've depleted our seed stock this year, but every year, usually sometime in the month of February, we used to try to open on February 1st, but that date can vary. We will start accepting seed requests through the Gadugi portal. So people can get online, fill out your application, and then get a request in. The date can vary, and we're not sure how the process is going to vary going forward in the future, but we will always be available through the Gadugi portal.
All right, so if you haven't registered on the Gadugi portal, go do that now. And also, talking about that beautiful garden next to the complex at Cherokee Nation, you can learn more. You can see that for yourself and learn more about the seed bank and Feather if you watch her story, which we did on OCO TV. So just visit oco.tv and type in Feather and you will find her story. One more common question I hear regarding citizens planting, growing, and cultivating the seeds from the seed bank is, does the heirloom garden accept these cultivated seeds from our citizens?
We do not. So initially when the seed bank was started, we wanted to be able to set it up where it was actually an exchange program where citizens would receive seeds from us and then be able to send those seeds back. There are some issues because things like corn, squash, pumpkins very, very easily cross-pollinate. And so we quickly realized that that wasn't quite the best plan. We definitely encourage citizens who come away with seeds. If you have an excess of seeds, which is easy to have happen as we experienced, please share those with other citizens, share those with your family, your community members. Every time that a citizen shares those seeds, it takes just a little bit of the strain off of the seed bank, because we're still a very small program for a very large tribe, but we do not accept seeds back.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much. Wade, can you elaborate on the significance of traditional Cherokee plants and medicine in relation to modern healthcare practices? So is there room for individuals to pursue both paths to wellness?
Yes, ma'am. In my experience, Cherokees, we have to go to the doctor. We do. At this point, even our eldest first language Cherokee speakers, they go to the mainstream doctors just like everybody else. But those elders also use our traditional medicines, not just for spiritual purposes, but for physical ailments as well. And, when I was younger, I would hear stories that people would have to do one or the other, that you either do the white man's medicine or you do the Indian medicine. And I heard that, but I don't hear that anymore. And that's a good thing to me, because what I've noticed is that as science progresses and we learn more about the world, a lot of times it kind of validates some of our traditional knowledge, some of our indigenous knowledge. And it seems to me, from my limited perspective, be getting closer and closer together, what our ancestors knew, what our elders know, and what our scientists are learning. So we are scientific, intelligent people. We've always been scientific. We've always had kind of our own version of the scientific method. And it's tied to our traditional way of thinking, our traditional cultural practices. So it's a bit of an adaptation to use modern medicine with our traditional Cherokee medicine, but I think that it's a good thing that people are learning to do both, and that one is not necessarily in competition or at odds with the other. And our elders say that if we don't use our traditional medicine, it will go away. It won't be there for us. And I believe that through my life experience, but also, you know, from visiting with other people, experience with other people that have, you know, lived around here and grown up around here, that it makes our life better. That, yeah, you can go and get a prescription for something. You can go to a drugstore and buy something over the counter. But there's really something fulfilling about maintaining this relationship with the land, with the plants, the natural environment, and being able to work in cooperation with the things that what God gave us, to make our lives better, to make ourselves stronger. So I think that there's something really valuable about pursuing traditional medicine, and I really don't see conflict between that and mainstream medicine. And I think that I would, if I could, I would really like to encourage all of our Cherokee people to use traditional medicine when possible, but not neglect their necessary medical treatments that they would get from mainstream science, from the mainstream medical profession.
I think it's really interesting how you talked about them coming closer together, you know, because I think that's true in not only medicine, but a lot of different sciences, where as other scientists learn more, they're coming back to Native Americans, to tribal knowledge, and saying like, oh yeah, I see what's happening, and it's really informing a lot of the sciences. So that's a really interesting point.
Yeah, I've kind of always been an ethnobiologist wannabe. So it's cool to be sitting up here with Feather.
Yeah.
When I was younger, undergraduate, my focus was on zoology and microbiology. I ended up changing my major and graduating with something a little bit more, you know, Indian focused, but I've always had a love for science. And I noticed when I was young that there were some things that I was learning in school and in class that was different than what the elders in my family had taught me and other elders I'd spoken with. But as I got older and I became more educated and I learned more about ecology and how these sciences are starting to come together and kind of have a more holistic perspective, what they might call, you know, cross-discipline. It's really clear to me that things are not as different as what I originally had thought when I was younger, that what our elders teach us, what our ancestors believed, is not that far out of alignment with what we can learn from modern science. There may be some differences, but ultimately they support each other.
Absolutely. Yeah. So Feather, how does the Cherokee Nation, when it comes to plants and plants as medicine, how does the Cherokee Nation protect the accessibility and sustainability of these valuable natural resources?
So I work with our Secretary of Natural Resources office, and that's something that we're always kind of exploring ways to further ensure that we are protecting our natural resources. Of course, obviously we have our wildlife program who does things like following hunting regulations, and we try to follow that similar school of thought when it comes to sharing information on plant natural resources. But a big portion of that is just, you know, we're fortunate that Cherokee Nation has so many properties that are really in pristine condition, and it's understanding which of those properties are in that best condition and making sure that they remain that way, such as having one of the properties set aside as being a Cherokee Medicine Keepers Preserve. Mm-hmm. That's one of the best sites I think I've ever been in Oklahoma. It's one of my favorite places to visit, and it's because there's so many natural resources in such a small area, and really it's not a small area, it's a large area, but there's so much packed into that one space that to see it set aside for the purpose of preservation and what again is really cultural preservation is really exciting. One of the other things that we try to do just at the Cherokee Nation Heirloom Garden is if we have success with certain plants, so Wade had mentioned earlier prairie willow. Prairie willow is a species that has been oftentimes very over-harvested, and so it has kind of become rare in the state of Oklahoma, but it grows really, really well in a garden setting, and it really loves our site, which is shocking because not most of the plants really like being in our site. So it does so well that we're able to take clippings off of prairie willow and sometimes start new plants. And occasionally we find that being able to do projects like that will take some of the stress off of our native populations that we have around us, and then we're able to give that back to the communities who really need it and use it the most. So we're always just kind of looking and sort of having to evolve our approach on how to best protect these resources. And sometimes that may even just be an education, sort of as, again, Wade mentioned earlier, teaching people how to do cultural practices when harvesting so that we're not over-harvesting a resource.
Yeah, how wonderful though that we are, taking the time and the effort and investing in keeping these resources alive and well. So Wade, it seems that a majority of our citizens are interested, I hear, in our tobacco. So can you elaborate on the reason behind tobacco as a spiritual use?
Yes, ma'am. Absolutely. I think spiritually, it's one of the primary things that most Cherokees associate with our traditional medicine practices. And I think that, we have to be honest about the potential dangers of tobacco when we talk about our traditional practices as well, because it is addictive. There are warning labels on, commercial tobacco that talk about the fact that it is cancer-causing, a leading cause of heart disease, potentially fatal. And our elders say that our medicine is strong, and when it's used appropriately, it makes your life better. And if it's abused, it can hurt you, it can kill you. And the stronger the medicine, the more potentially dangerous it is. So from that perspective, tobacco is a very potentially dangerous and strong traditional medicine. And it shouldn't be used for pleasure. However, when people become addicted to it, it's really hard to draw the line between pleasure and use for legitimate purposes. But traditionally speaking, when we use tobacco for spiritual reasons, the whole goal of it is to make your life better and to have a good relationship with it. And so that relationship also has to do with an awareness of usage. Historically, our ancestors focused on one species of tobacco, Nicotiana rustica, which is Joel Agayan. Joel Agayan is ancient tobacco, mountain tobacco, and it's not the same species as commercial tobacco, which is tabacum, Nicotiana tabacum. And the traditional tobacco, Joel Agayan, is a lot stronger, has a higher nicotine content, and it's green. Even when it's cured, it stays green, and it tastes horrible. It's something that modern Cherokees will use in moderation, not just because it's not necessarily an easy thing to use, but also because it's rare. You have to grow it. You can't buy it at the store. And the seed bank does provide seeds for this traditional tobacco. Cherokees will use over-the-counter commercial tobacco, but some Cherokees will use it in conjunction with our historical traditional tobacco. But both of those tobaccos are used in a way that we don't use mainstream medicine. In that regard, it's a spiritual relationship with this plant. There are old stories that talk about how this plant came to us, but ultimately the focus is that this plant was given to us to make our lives better, and that we could use this plant in exchange for other natural medicines. So you go to a plant that you need in the woods or an animal that you need, and you offer some tobacco in exchange for taking a piece of that plant or harvesting that animal. You talk to the tobacco, you tell that plant or that animal why you need it, and you offer that tobacco in exchange for that plant's medicine or that medicine that you take from the natural environment. They say that the tobacco is like an ancient contract between our people and all of creation. So when we use this tobacco and we talk to the tobacco and we talk to this plant and we ask this plant for its medicine, we're given this tobacco kind of as an exchange for it. And this tobacco is spiritually receptive. So people will talk to this tobacco in the Cherokee language, not just to harvest plants or animals from the environment for medicinal purposes, but also to have a spiritual influence, that our spirits communicate with each other, and the spirit of that tobacco also communicates. So you put the prayers or the words in the tobacco, and you release those prayers, and the spirit of that tobacco has an influence spiritually on our spirits. So if a person approaches a house and there's a lot of conflict and arguing going on in that house, a person could talk to this tobacco and say, I'm asking for the spirits of this house to become calm, to become more at peace. And then by releasing that tobacco in that area, its spirit will interact with the spirits in that home, and it will begin to influence the people there in a good way. So that's the way it was given to us, to make our lives better, to make each other's lives better. And sometimes, there's a belief among our people that people could use this spiritual influence in a negative way. And that's really not worth talking about, but just to acknowledge it, that although this is a belief and there are people that have this concern, it's not the concern that our elders tell us to focus on. Mm-hmm. That medicine is for good. It's not for joy. It's not for entertainment. It's not for pleasure. It's to make your life better and to make the lives of your loved ones better. And that means that we don't use it in anger or in vengeance, that we always pray the best for people, and that tobacco is ultimately a part of the process to help us pray.
Thank you so much. Such an important part of our culture, and sharing that with everyone. I know people will be really receptive to having that understanding. And a lot of what you've spoken today is representative of knowledge that's shared from the Cherokee Medicine Keepers group. So can you share any insights into the impact you believe they will have within the community as the project grows? This is for either of you. Yeah.
So obviously Ryan is a medicine keeper, and I think he can speak to this far more than I can, but in the time that I have sat in my position, the favorite part of my job during all of this time is the time that I've gotten to spend with our medicine keepers. When they do projects, we get to go along and just kind of be there to help out. And every time that we're out in the field, they're always teaching us. And we're always learning, and we're hearing the language, and we're hearing the stories. And there's this constant interaction, because that's the Cherokee way. It's that we have this relationship with those plants, and that they just can't help. They're always sharing that knowledge. And so I have gotten to learn so much from them, which was really a big portion of why the group was created, was to preserve this traditional knowledge and then to be able to share it with the next generations. And I get to sit here as part of that next generation that's directly learning from them, and I've gotten to see them teach their students as well. And so it's definitely having the impact that I think that they hope to have from the very beginning. And just always such an exciting project to get to be a part of.
I would like to echo that. I mean, for the most part, these are first language Cherokee-speaking elders. And there's some of us that are younger that kind of get to learn from them, and I'm really humbled to be a part of it at all. I was there shortly after they started, kind of sneaking in almost. There were a couple elders that said, "Come to this meeting," and I showed up, and I'm like, I really shouldn't be here. But they said, "No, just sit there and be quiet." And I've got to learn a lot of amazing things over the years, and it started out, with them sharing with each other, because these were knowledgeable elders that knew what they were talking about. Some of the wisest, most knowledgeable spiritual and community leaders even, and they were sharing with each other, and at some point they pointed us younger folks out and said, "These are the ones that need to be learning." They want us to learn in the language, but at the same time they know that our language is limited. I've worked my whole life to learn Cherokee, and I still don't speak like those elders, but with my limited language, I've been able to understand a lot of what they're saying in Cherokee when they switch to Cherokee. And a lot of times they do say it in Cherokee. But over the last probably 3 or 4, it was before COVID, almost a decade now, really, they've really started to focus on younger people, learners, folks that they've asked to come in and participate in this process, folks that work with Feather, and folks that are almost like volunteers from the community.
Mm-hmm.
They are learning what our elders are wanting us to learn. Mm-hmm. And it's not an easy way to share, because in mainstream society and academia, knowledge is almost like a right, that when I learn something, it is my job to pass it on to somebody else. But our traditional spiritual knowledge, which includes our medicinal practices, it's a privilege. Mm-hmm. And it's not a right to have this knowledge. And so for them to open up to us, it is a great privilege. And it's not necessarily an easy thing for them to do, because to talk about these things openly is not normal. Mm-hmm. It's not something that's comfortable. And so them teaching the younger generation is challenging. But when I think about the future, it's going to happen more and more.
Yeah.
And that's really where the impact is going to come in, because other elders will be brought in. This will be brought out to other communities. It will have a wider reach. Young people will come in and sit at the feet of these elders, and they will become the next knowledge keepers, the next medicine keepers one day. And as this expands and we become more used to openly speaking about good things and to sharing our traditional knowledge, things to help people, then our communities will feel that impact, and they will grow in knowledge and in strength, just like the individuals that have access to this knowledge. And in turn, our entire Cherokee nation, our Cherokee people, will be better off. Because for too long, we've needed to hold these things almost separate from everyday life. They said these things are set apart, and that means that it creates difficulty in gaining access to these very important things. And they'll say if people want to have access to these things, they will participate in these things. So we're learning how to access those things and share those things with a generation of people that did not grow up in first language speaking Cherokee homes. We didn't grow up like our grandparents or great-grandparents. And so we're having to adapt to them, and they're having to adapt to us. And in the future, I think that all Cherokees will benefit from the knowledge of these medicine keepers.
I agree. And I have to say, if people out there are wanting to learn even more, what you guys have explained today is so amazing. But if they're even wanting to learn more about the medicine keepers and how they are teaching the next generation, we were fortunate enough to get some of them to agree to be on camera. And so we do have an OCO TV story showcasing the Medicine Keepers program. And it's just, it was a joy of mine to just have that little bit of insight to work with those medicine keepers during that time. And you guys have both been great in sharing your extensive knowledge regarding all of this, our ancient ways through plants and medicine, the seed bank program. We really appreciate your time today. So thank you, Wado, for joining me.
Wado.
Next up, we welcome back the talented musician, Cherokee National Treasure, Tommy Wildcat. We're very glad to have him back in the studio. Tommy? Wado, Tommy, that's going to do it for us today. We thank each of our guests for joining us and for their ongoing work. There is no Cherokee word for goodbye because we know we'll see you again. We say, Dodadago, hunt ye. We hope you enjoyed today's show and hope you will join us again next month. Wado.